Welcome to the Exit Ready podcast. Ryan Ray here as always. Today you're going to love the episode. Be sure to never miss what's going on with the Exit Ready cohort intensive by going to www.rgahub.com/exit ready. That's rgahub.com/exit ready. I'll put a link to this in the description below so you can check it out. But if you're an owner, you're not going to want to miss this. Now, let's get to the show. Well, John, it's been a long time since we've spoken on Zoom. You were one of the first people, I think, last year when I was looking to do some of this work who I spoke with. And you've always been a great resource for me. I got your book right here, Output Thinking, which we'll link to. It's one of my favorite business books there is, and I don't say that just to flatter you. I really, really love it. So do a quick background, and then what made you write the book?
Yeah, Ryan. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I've been an entrepreneur my whole working life. I've literally never had a job. The craziest company I had, I started in the 90s. We sold movie libraries to apartments, and it was a marketing tool for them. They had like 50 movies, and if you rented an apartment, you could borrow them for free, and we changed them out every month. So it was Netflix before there was Netflix. And I started the company in Texas, and most of our business was in the South and Southwest. But I'm from the Northeast, and I wanted to get back to where I grew up for lifestyle reasons. And it didn't make sense to move the company. But I realized that there are companies that have headquarters in one state and offices in another, and figured out they can do it. Now, today, in 2025, that's not uncommon because of the internet. Back then, this was in the 90s, there was no internet that would do this. They literally had to overnight me data tapes. What I realized was being away from my company, I had to put systems in place. I had to be not just delegate, but be able to figure out what was going right, what was going wrong. I ended up working myself out of a job. I was working maybe 10, 15 hours a month. And I got time to do something else. Somebody said, you all look into this thing called coaching. So I got into business coaching with a bunch of us. We founded the International Coach Federation. I was their fourth president in 1998. They're up to they just celebrated their 30th anniversary. They're up to like 50,000 members worldwide now. So, but that's what I do. I help other business owners put systems in place that they can get out of the day-to-day work of their company, which if they want to sell, that makes their companies more valuable. If they don't want to sell, they can do what I call exit without selling your company, where you're not involved in the day-to-day, you're not working very much, you still have ownership. There's usually one or two strategic things that you're still involved in, but you're making a lot more money.
I love that. That's part of the Exit Ready intensive we're going to be doing is kind of helping owners understand that. So let's a couple questions here first. So let's define systems. You hear that word all the time. Systems.
Yes.
These systems. So in a simple definition, when you say systems, what does that mean?
A system is, first of all, most people think it's a computer system. It's not. It's a method of repeatedly producing an output. And the reason I wrote the book was that most of my coaching clients have been frustrated by a disconnect between what they expect employees to do and what the employees think a good job looks like. And the reason that you hire somebody is to produce an output. Now, that output can be produced one of two ways. One is an expert who's got a lot of intuition, a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience. I call that grandma in the kitchen with no recipe. Makes great food, but it's not scalable. Many business owners find themselves in that position because they built this company, they've grown it, they know all the details, and all the problems come to them. And they can't seem to get out of the way. The other way that an output is produced is with what I call a system. So that's something that's repeatable. It's got a trigger. It's got a transformation. There are documented processes. There's a DAMS. I call it the DAMS rubric. It's documented. Somebody's accountable. There are metrics, and it's subdivided properly for growth.
Okay. And so that's helpful to kind of set that. So how do systems tie into outputs then?
Systems are the way, a robust system is the way that outputs should be produced in a company. And the more systems that are in place, the more that those outputs don't depend on individual experts, the more repeatable it is, the more valuable that company is.
And then where would you rank KPIs. That's a big buzzword today. KPI this, KPI that. So I've got mixed emotions on KPIs, but where would you rank KPIs? So you got systems, you got outputs, and then where do KPIs fall in?
KPIs are the measurement of or the accountability of the production of those outputs. Now, and that's KPIs are not dependent on how that output is produced. If it's produced by a grandma in the kitchen, great. It's good food, it's a great KPI. If it's produced by a system, which is what you see in restaurants, where you have sous chefs and line cooks and people doing different things, but it all produces the same thing. One is more scalable than the other. If it's your business, one is more valuable than the other.
You mentioned in your book the E Myth, which I read a long time ago, and then you mentioned restaurants. And as I've been thinking about, I was reading through your book, I don't know, a couple months ago, 2 months ago maybe. Anyways, restaurants came to mind because so much of what they do is, as you just mentioned, there's a certain type of person for this and for that and for that and for that. And a traditional business, we might say, doesn't think about it like that. But that's kind of backwards, right? Because they're not really going, oh, well, what is this person supposed to be doing? And I thought you did a good job in the book of starting with the job description. Of like the job description doesn't even a lot of times require output. So where do you see a lot of companies fail maybe with a job description that doesn't put any onus on the employee to deliver an output, and then it ends up with a review going, well, the employee thought they did great because they matched the job description, but the owner thought us about the output. And so, how do you synthesize all that?
Job descriptions and job titles, particularly, can be used as a shortcut for outputs, but often that connection is not exact. So, you may hire somebody to be a lead technician. Let's say you have a plumbing company and you've got a bunch of plumbers out on the road and a lead technician. Well, that's a title, but that doesn't say how many jobs they need to be accountable to do, how quickly they need to be accountable for them, what authority do they have if they need to order new parts or whatever. So all those little things in there, those are the outputs. And those need to be defined properly if you're going to scale a company. What many business owners get, I don't want to say in trouble, but it works when they're the owner and they're there. But if they want to sell the company, it needs to not depend on them for the buyer had to be able to pay more.
The buyer, and also if they want to hire a president or a CEO or whatever, and or someone an
Right.
operator to run the company, then you're kind of saying, hey, run this thing, but what is Bob or Tammy supposed to do? Well, I know, but it's not really documented anywhere.
Yeah. So the definition, the clear definition of outputs leads to the ability to document how those outputs are produced, which leads to better training, which leads to better hiring, which leads to better management. It's all of a piece. The thing I like to say to people who are getting ready to sell their company is your buyer is going to want to buy for the future. They're going to want to change their company. They're going to want to improve the company, but they're going to be looking at due diligence, which is numbers about the past. And the disconnect is how are those numbers, how have they been produced, and how are they going to be produced when you, as the seller, are no longer on the scene? If you can eliminate a lot of that by restructuring your company before you sell, it's much more valuable.
Yeah. And how much do you think, in your experience, this is from people just haven't come across your line of thinking, and so they're like, I didn't know that existed. That was kind of my thought. Like when I read your book, I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. I'm so stupid. Why haven't I thought of this before? But then I wonder how much of it ties to, well, the pride aspect of it. I'm giving up too much control if I do this, and I've seen that from time to time where owners don't want to give up the control to make their life better, easier, because they're afraid of what might happen.
Yeah, I don't think that all entrepreneurs are control freaks. There are a few, but most of the time it's because entrepreneurs are intuitive and they're quick and they know exactly when something's going off the rails, but they're not procedural. They're not process oriented. And so they're afraid to give it away because they know somebody else could screw it up. But if they put the right systems in place, if they put the right documentation in place, those systems will have checkpoints where they can jump in, or somebody else could jump in and fix it before it goes off the rails. So it's, again, go back to the kitchen analysis. If grandma's making 6 different things in 6 different places in the kitchen all at once, she kind of knows what's going on, but nobody else does. Whereas if he has a recipe, you can say, oh, did you put the right amount of salt in? Did you set the oven at the right temperature? If not, you can fix it before the cake comes out of the oven.
Hey, quick break here. If you're an owner, do you know that most companies will never actually sell? That means that all those years that you put into building your business are for nothing. If you want to build a business that's valuable, that people will want to buy, and you can make potentially millions of dollars from, go to rjhub.com or click in the link below. That's rjhub.com, or click on the link below. And now back to the episode. So in this output thinking world, unless you're like Discount Tire in town, they're always packed. A lot of businesses, they go up and down, right? They have busy times and slow times. How does that account for an employee who might not be busy year round, but they're going to have some downtime? Do you have different outputs for that, and how would that work into your system?
So the two main systems that every company has to do is they have to sell something, which means find a customer, get them to commit, and then they have to fulfill what that customer bought. And if those things are happening in tandem, because you don't want to sell stuff you can't produce and you don't want to make stuff that you can't sell, then everything else, that's where the choke points are. Everything else goes into supporting the making and the selling. So procurement, people, money, facilities, all that stuff. Some of those other things may have downtimes. And you want your key, what is called in throughput, seeing your choke points or your bottlenecks, you want those to be 100% effective all the time. But the other stuff is in support of that. So if somebody else has a little bit of lag time, then great, put them on some other task. Get them to clean up, or get them to redo something, or get them to do training, or whatever. If your systems are structured properly and your price is structured properly, as long as the selling and the fulfillment are going in sync, things will be working out well for you.
Yeah. And you mentioned training, and output thinking helps with training, because now you're saying this is what this person is supposed to do. Whereas, you might still need a job shadow and stuff like that. But if you go, well, take, Tammy's role, well, what does Tammy do? Well, here's a job description that's kind of vague. No, here's exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm sure that ties into a more comprehensive training program as well.
Yes, there's 3 different kinds of how you document different kinds of outputs. One is what I call the recipe. It's a very clear step-by-step process. Do this, do that, do the other thing. That's really useful when somebody's doing something on the computer. Here's how you cut an invoice. You click here, you fill in the person's name, you click here to put the amount, you click over here to print, all that stuff. It's also useful with a physical tool. Here's how you set up this machine. Here's how you adjust the pressure on this, whatever. It's a step-by-step thing. That's a recipe. And many, if not most, of the standard operating procedures, your SOPs, can be documented that way. Those are then also used for training a new person. It's not just follow Tammy around and figure out what she does. It's actually watch this video, go through this step-by-step process. There is a kind of SOP that can't be documented with a recipe, and those are usually ones that involve other people. So a sales process or a customer service. When somebody calls in and says, I have this problem, I can't tell you exactly what to say to diagnose it, but I can tell you what the output of that diagnosis should be. Or if you're talking to somebody, you're trying a prospect, and you're in a sales conversation, I can't tell you exactly what to say, but I can tell you at the end of that call, you should know perhaps what their budget is, or what their buying process is, or what their timeline is. You can qualify them. So you can describe the outputs and then let the person dance to get there. That's what I call the dance SOP. And then the third kind is where you don't really even know what the output looks like, but you know what the constraints are. So, for example, you need to get another logo, so you hire a graphic artist. Well, if you knew what it should look like, you wouldn't need the graphic artist. You could say, you need to do this. But you can tell them, here are the constraints, meaning it needs to have this kind of mood. Are we going to be fanciful? Are we going to be, systematic? Are we going to be, structured? These are the colors that we need to use. This is the fonts that we need to use. So you can describe the constraints for a creation kind of SOP. And any of those, if they're applied properly, can be used to train new people.
Yeah, and I think when I first read the E Myth years ago, just that realization that because we were working in oil and gas and so on pipelines and stuff like that, and to watch how a pipeline is put together by people who can't design pipeline, like that's not their thing. They can weld a pipeline, they can lift a pipeline, they can do a lot of stuff, but they can't design how the pipe gets the oil out of the ground and takes it to the refinery. That's not their job. And so that was like, oh yeah, duh. This is how big companies actually do things. Like they have it and they compartmentalize it. And then reading your books, like, oh wait, this is actually how you kind of take that mentality and you bring it down to this level. And so those three levels you mentioned there, I think it was Zappos. I was listening to something the other day on, I think it was Zappos. Anyways, and for their customer support, they kind of had that thing where, okay, here's kind of where you start at. But then at this point, it's up to the customer representative to figure out how to navigate the call. And so it wasn't a straight script of 10 things you got to ask, and then you get the client off the call. It's 10 things or whatever it was. And then after that, you kind of feel what's going on. And so I do think some people fear that they can become too rigid with systems, but you can't allow for that kind of
Oh,
flow
you
for
have to.
personality to be in there. Yes, exactly.
You have to allow for good judgment. The trick is to know how to train somebody with good judgment and how to know when that judgment kicks in. You don't want somebody, go back to your pipeline example, you don't want each individual welder to decide how thick the weld should be and all that stuff. You don't want that judgment. It has to meet these criteria. It has to be safe. It has to be, this much. You don't want to waste too much money on doing this or too much time on doing this. That all has to be prescribed. But back to your other point, the design of that pipeline, that's a whole different set of outputs. And you don't expect the person who's making the welding to design the pipeline. It's a whole different skill set and a whole different output.
So why do you think this mentality is? It seems pervasive across, a McDonald's, a pipeline company. It seems pervasive across them, but in the SMB world, it's something that owners don't. I mean, once you kind of point it out, it becomes obvious. Oh, all the big companies do something like this they're successful at least. But the small business world, some might do it, some might not. Why do you think it hasn't trickled down as pervasive in the smaller business world?
It's a different skill set, for one thing. The people who most quickly resonate with output thinking tend to be engineering types, whereas many business owners have really just clawed their way to the top by grit and determination. And that gets you so far. But to get to the next level, you have to systemize at least some of what you do. And I want to go back to the point that if you're going to sell your company, the more systems you have in place, the less that depends on you, the more valuable your company is going to be. And there's a tool to do that, which is every output has a frequency. If you think about all the outputs that you hire people to do and that you do yourself as a business owner, they all have a frequency. Some of them are done weekly. Some of them are done daily. Some of them maybe hourly. Some of them aren't done but monthly or quarterly. The more strategic ones tend to be done less frequently. And so if you just can take a piece of paper or a spreadsheet throughout the day and jot down the outputs, and decisions are outputs, relationships are outputs. It's not just making a physical widget that's an output. Jot down those things and then say, okay, how frequently does this need to be done? And the more frequent things that depend on you, the more you are tied to your business on a day-to-day basis. That's I see all the time with clients say, I haven't been able to take a vacation in 2 years. Well, we need to then process things better and get systems in place. When you sell your company, like I said, it's more valuable if there are systems in place, if there are other people selling, if most of the people that interact with your company aren't even aware of the change.
Yeah, I had a owner 23 or 20, I think it's 23, maybe 24. Anyways, and the business did about 30 million a year. And he said, well, if I leave, the company shuts down. It's like, well, no, no, no. You have nothing to sell. You have nothing to sell. Like, and I don't know how true that was versus bravado, but he claimed he had all the client relationships and stuff like that. It's like, you've got a great company. But if what you're saying is true, then you have nothing to sell unless you want to go work for someone else when you exit. And some people want to get into the PE model or want to get bought by a strategic and keep going working, but he was older and didn't want to do that. And it's like, well, what are we selling here? We can't sell your relationships because you're going to go away. And so I think a lot of owners don't really realize that when they go to exit, um, the more tight grip that they have, whether they meant to or they didn't mean to or whatever the case is, the harder it is to exit because now everything depends on you, or the more stuff that depends on you, the harder it is to pull that away, especially client relationships.
Yes. In the output thinking book, I mentioned many different things that people don't think of as outputs. Obviously, making a widget is one, making a sale is one, making a hamburger is one. But another category is an output of changing the status. So an inspector changes the status of a part. It's either approved or it's rejected. Uh, Decisions are outputs. Relationships are outputs. And if you start thinking as the owner of all the things that the company depends on that you have to produce, the more it's tied to you, the less valuable your company is, and the less likely that transition is going to go well.
And the hard part is for most businesses that the owner has to realize that, to your point earlier, there was grit and determination that got them to where they are. But most customers and consumers don't care if they deal with the owner ever. Like, unless they're like really mad or they're a problem client, we can talk about it maybe. But most people, they just want the tire change or they just want the widget or whatever it is. You know, when you go to the restaurant, you feel special if the chef that owns the restaurant made you the meal. But if you get a great steak, you really don't care. Like, it really doesn't matter. And so I think it's a perception that we bring upon ourselves is that if you have a what I'll call a normal business, that you have to be involved. Whereas I would argue the more you remove yourself, the better levers that you can pull to help grow the business so that it's not so dependent on you that if you do sell or if you want to grow, you're like, hey, we really need to grow. We're not big enough to exit yet. We need to grow. Well, it's easier to grow if you have a team that can operate, a large percentage of the company without you being there day to day.
Yeah, there's a big shift between what I call stage one companies, where the person in charge, the owner or CEO, is actively involved in customer interaction. So they're doing primarily selling, or they're doing a lot of the fulfillment themselves. Like you said, the chef that's coming out to visit all the restaurant people. Um, a stage two company, you have people in charge to do that. You have salespeople that are responsible and good at selling. You have fulfillment people who are good at that. You, as the owner, now are more internally focused on building the team, building the structure, hiring the right people. That's a different skill set. And it takes working with a coach to get from one of those to the next one to make your company much more valuable. Now you have something to sell that doesn't depend on you being there.
One of the things that I've come across, and I'm curious your thoughts here, is I've talked to so many owners, and they will say my problems are unique. And on some level, sometimes they are unique, right? They might have a special case of dealing with an employee or some kind of contract situation or whatever. But by and large, the problems are usually the same. They just have a little. It's like going to Baskin Robbins. You get vanilla ice cream. This one has chocolate syrup. This one has whipped cream. It's pretty much the same base, a little bit different topping. Has that been your experience as well? That owners kind of feel they have a unique problem, but really it's not that much different from everyone else, and it's okay to admit that you're stuck because most of us are.
Yeah, I think the way I say it in the output thinking book is at the highest level, all of the outputs in the company, in every company, fill the same seven buckets. So there's selling, there's fulfillment, there's people, there's money, there's planning, There's all these different things that all look the same at the highest level. The details of how you do that can differ. So how you cut an invoice in your company might be very different from the way I cut an invoice in my company, either because of what we're selling or the software that we use or whatever. But if you break those down into those levels, the outputs are, oh, I need to get an invoice so I can get paid, you know. And if we can see patterns, which if in 30 years of coaching with business owners, I've seen a lot of patterns. Uh, you can solve those things by things that you've seen before.
So you mentioned a minute ago stage one and stage two companies. Do you have some metrics that you would use to define that, or is it just as the owner has to be involved? Is it employees, revenue? Is there a way to think about that more broadly?
I have a chart that goes over, I think it's about 10 or 12 different categories, but the biggest one is where does the owner spend their time? If they're focused on customers, then it's typically a stage one company. If they're focused internally, then they have other people to do the customer facing work, the selling and the fulfillment and all that. And they're focused, like I said, on building the team. Um, and it's, so that's the main criteria is where does the owner spend their time? And then there's a stage three company, which is now it's being called a hold company, a hold co, where there are sometimes a person in charge, might be the COO, might be called president. They might have be a division head. They have P&L responsibility for that aspect of the business. And the owner of a holding company is now looking for other companies to buy or other companies to fold into the organization that they do. So they're, again, outwardly focused, but now not on the customers. They're now focused on the industry and maybe buying or selling.
Okay, so if someone's watching this, they might go, Ryan, I don't know about John, but Ryan, you have a stage one company. Why? What's wrong with that? And for me, I have an answer for why I have stage one. I sold a stage two, by your definition. Would you consider yourself a stage one? And what's the difference between deciding to go from stage one to stage two in your mind, from an exit standpoint or from any standpoint, I should say?
There's nothing wrong with any of this. It's your company. It should serve your life. I literally had a client, and I was working with her. She did sales training, and I was explaining. We'd been working together probably 6 or 8 months already, and I explained this to her, and she said, I don't want to be a stage two. I like that interaction with the customers. And I said, great. Be really good at what you do. Raise your prices so you can serve the top of the market and have a blast. You're not going to be able to sell that company. One of the ways to look at a stage one company that can't be sold is a practice. So a neurosurgeon, they can make a lot of money, but they can't sell their practice because it's them. A rock star, an athlete, they can sell their name and they can sell their endorsements and all that stuff, but they're making money because of who they are. Now, there are a lot of other companies that can be scaled up, plumbing companies or HVAC companies or retail stores or whatever, that may at the beginning depend on the owner being customer facing. But those can be scaled up and the owner can pull back.
Yeah, and I would say so. The company I sold was a stage two. The company I have now is stage one, and I would say that, to your point, if you want to be a stage one, stay stage one. Great. Just understand that you have to figure out how to maximize your profit, your margins, because there is no big payday coming down the road. And so just keep that in mind. I think a lot of owners don't, they kind of miss that. Like, oh, when I get to the end, I'll sell this thing. It's like, no, well, you might sell. I'm a capitalist, so you can sell anything for anything, I guess you could say. But reality is the big payday that you're thinking won't be there unless you go to stage two, right? So if you want to be a stage one, just do all your retirement planning and all that stuff around that mentality. But if you ever expect that big payday, because I've talked to owners in their 60s ready to retire, and they're expecting a couple $1,000,000 to sell, and it's like, no, this is not worth much. Unfortunately, I feel bad. It's like it's not worth much. It's just not going to get
Yeah,
what you
you
what
can
you want.
sell you can sell it for parts. You can sell the
Yeah.
customer list. You can sell the equipment and that kind of thing. But yeah, in my life now, I have gotten rid of all the bigger companies, the stage two companies that I had, I'm mostly retired, but my line is I don't play golf. So I'm still working with entrepreneurs. I still love doing that. But that's a practice for me. I'm not building a big coaching company. I'm not, I have a limited number of clients that I work with, and I work, very intensely with them because I enjoy it. And that's my stage one company at this stage in my life. I wouldn't be that way if I was in my 30s,
Yeah.
you know. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's your business. It goes back to your business should serve your life and get what you want from it and build the kind of company that's going to serve the kind of life that you want. I have a client, I actually wrote about him in the book, and hadn't talked to him in a while. We stopped working together, and I've recently reconnected. And what he did was he built his company up. They were in different, a special part of the car business, aftermarket stuff. And he was selling a lot of product to a major, I think a $2 billion corporation, and they wanted to buy his company. So he sold them, I think it was 40% of it, and they got a right of first refusal on the rest. When they were ready to buy the rest, he sold the rest to them. But he was also able to carve out a another set of territories that he built up on his own. And now he's got all this money from his sale because none of it depended on him. And now he's got these other, I think, 7 different locations that he just manages remotely. And he says, I'm involved in a couple of the financial decisions now and then. I said, what's the main problem facing you right now? He says, how to spend my money. So good
Tell them
problems
to
to
call
have.
me. Tell them
Yeah.
I got some spots you can invest in. So, well, and that kind of leads me to this, which is I used to even say that there was two types of business, lifestyle and kind of a traditional. But now I've kind of shifted my thinking that any business can be a quote lifestyle business if kind of what you said is build your life around the business you want, or maybe I said backwards what you said, but in essence, the goal of the owner is to build a business to serve the customer, but to keep in mind that they have a life that they have to live too, right? And so you should build your business if it's stage one or stage two with that in mind. And we have so many resources now on how to go from stage one to stage two, whereas 1992 is probably a little bit harder. I mean, we didn't have the internet like you were talking about earlier. Now there's all kinds of tools and accessible tools that you can get your hands on. And so I think a lot of owners just have to make that decision. Am I going to be stage one? Am I going to be stage two? Is there anything that you've learned from your years of experience of what makes someone make that jump that's successful versus someone who fails from going to stage one to stage two?
I think it's more the opposite. More people are afraid of going to stage two. And so they're afraid of having to deal with employees and stuff. So they stay small and they don't see how to get there. And that's really the thing that keeps them back. And others look at it and say, okay, that's not what I want. And that's fine too. But if you want to get to that stage two where the thing can grow and really produce some wealth when you sell, there are certainly ways to do it.
Okay, so January 13th, you will be hosting the first week of this 10-week intensive, the Exit Ready Intensive. Give people a little bit of a preview of what they can expect if they come hear you speak.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the difference between systems and outputs that are produced by the experts, the intuitive experts that have no process, and the ones that are scalable process. We're going to talk about the different aspects of those systems and processes that are the same in every company. And then we're going to talk about how do you get from where you are now to where you want to be.
And of course, John will be there to answer questions as well. So it's going to be great. And we will put this out on socials. The link that John will have will not be out probably when this goes live, but shortly thereafter. And if you use John's link, you get $1,000 off. So be sure to check his out. And where can people find you, John, if they want to learn more about your infinite wisdom,
Yeah.
it seems, on this topic?
Thank you. I don't think it's infinite, but my website is ceobootcamp.com. There's a link there. You can email me. I'm happy to take questions. There's a place where you can find my book at outputthinking.com. There's also a place there where you can sign up for a free coaching session.
John, you've been wonderful as always. It's so good to talk to you again, and looking forward to January 13th to hear more wisdom. I have a copy of the book right here. I've referenced it multiple times, and I will reference it again before your speech because it's honestly. I've got some books over here about business strategy, and I love that because that's like I like thinking strategically, if you will. The problem is a lot of that content is for real big companies, like it's real big thinking stuff. This is for the owners that we're talking to, and so I'm looking forward to your talk and chatting with you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.